Thank you very much. We're now going to start our 2 o'clock session, and we've got a really good one for you. So we're now going to be talking about real-world use cases on Avalanche, a bit of practicality to the lessons you've learned today, and I'm delighted to have John and Jay from Avalabs. John, VP of Business Development, Jay, VP of Marketing, two quite important figures. They won't admit it themselves, but I think so. Delighted to have you both here. We're going to talk again about the more practical elements. An easy question to kind of start things off. We're in a fantastic venue, a fantastic event. What is exciting you most about this weekend, particularly with the Formula E in mind and Avalanche's involvement in it?
Yeah, maybe I can kick it off with the simple, which is actually meeting everybody in person. I think it's really important to really humanize our space a little bit. A lot of times, especially with COVID, we're kind of hiding behind our screens. We're not sure who's behind that PFP for those that have those uploaded. I have my headshot, so everyone kind of knows what I look like. But really understanding who's building in the ecosystem. What are the important questions that are being asked? Are we actually solving for problems that exist, or are we solving for problems that we're making up? And I think this is where, hopefully, in the context of Formula E as well, we'll highlight a lot of the value props related to eco-friendliness in the environment, and kind of merge those discussions. And I think that's where programming like the Blockchain 101 track is super important, because I think for our industry, I know Anthony with OnCode and us with Avalabs, we tend to focus on those that know a fair amount about blockchain and Web3 as a whole. But maybe sometimes we have to take a step back and really do the test of, can we explain what we all do to the common person? Until we get to that point for certain verticals, it's not really going to make sense or much matter of anything that we're doing, because that's kind of the overall goal, hopefully. And just, again, to put it into real terms is something that I'm super excited about.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, building on what Jay said, right? It's great to see all of you here. It's great to be in Berlin, and I think what Formula E has given us an opportunity and a platform to do is reach people globally, right? So whether it's Mexico City, Berlin, we're traveling for the most part with this race season to meet people in our community, to reach out to a larger community, to bring what we do to a larger group of people. You know, I often say that people in this space are a little bit myopic and a little bit elitist, because what we do, we usually do with people in our space. To Jay's point, right, people that are crypto native or blockchain native tend to always speak the same thing to people who know what the other person is talking about. It's not until I talk to family or friends or about what I do that their eyes gloss over and they're completely confused. So I think our job, first and foremost, all of us up here and all of you and anybody in this ecosystem and within Avalanche, et cetera, is to educate, right? To educate people about what this technology can do at a base level. Our job is to educate as to why Avalanche is better in a technological sense, and why we think we're going to succeed more so than anyone else. But ultimately, we all kind of need to succeed together, right? At a base level, this industry needs to mature more. It's come a long way in a relatively short period of time. But I think our biggest goal is to educate and to continue to grow the pie. I think we know we're early because there's still maxis and people that are tribal and fight over what little thing is better here or there versus the other. At the end of the day, we're all kind of fighting over crumbs, when there's an entire kitchen on the other side of the wall that we could all go out there and be a part of, right? We're fighting over such a small market. And the opportunity for blockchain and for Avalanche in particular is so enormously large that the biggest job is, again, to educate. So I look forward to that. I think that's our job first and foremost. Second of all, it's to be here and meet all of you and to, align ourselves with everybody and keep growing this thing.
Awesome. So you touched upon explaining crypto, explaining Avalanche to family, friends, people here in this room that are new to the space. What is the use case, particularly with this theme in mind, you think that transcends understanding of blockchain? A use case that it's so intuitive that's coming up on Avalanche that's really going to convince people, sell it, without even having to mention Avalanche's name? If I just set that too hard.
There's a lot of questions in that question.
What's a good intuitive use case that's coming up that everyone can understand?
Transfer of value, period. Right? The easy way I explain it, if I had to, is what people are aware of with the internet is the transfer of information. What blockchains allow you to do is transfer value. Value could be money, it could be information that has a monetary value to it, or a new definition of value, right? That's what we do. But I want to push back on this question, right? Because people always ask, how do you explain blockchain to your mom or your grandma? And Jay's heard me say this a million times. My answer is I do not, right? If all of you use PayPal or Venmo or Zelle, does anybody ask you, how do you explain Venmo to your mom? No. Nobody cares. Let's be very clear. Nobody cares how it works. They know that they push a button and money gets sent from person A to person B, right? That's all they care about. Whether it's SEPA or SWIFT or FedWire or ACH or whatever underlying technology or infrastructure is being used, they know that it's fast, it's cheap, and it's relatively easy. Our job, your job as well, as builders and people in this space, and for us to go out there and stop fighting over crumbs, but to build something bigger, better, and take more market share, is to build something as easy, as fast, and as cheap, if not easier, faster, and cheaper, or else we're not going to be doing anything better, right? At the end of the day, we need to be better, faster, cheaper. There's this elitism in Web3, and what we do of, you need a private key. You don't know what a private key is? Right? There's this kind of, let me tell you how much smarter I am than you are because I know all this cool technology and you still haven't learned it yet. For us to reach the adoption that we need to really make changes that we would like to see happen, it's not going to happen, right? We need to educate, back to educating. Real world use cases, everything. Transferring money, collectibles, identity. There's a million things that are being built, but that have really big incumbent forces holding it back still. So it's not about replacing incumbents, it's about doing what exists now in a better, faster, easier way, right? So, things that come to my mind real quick, of course, first and foremost, payments, remittances, but digital identity, right? So the most exciting things in this space that I look forward to are things that I haven't thought of yet that someone is building now, right? Just like with Web 2, Facebook and Instagram and social media came. A few years before they came, no one knew what they were. They've transformed Web 2. I don't think we know yet what's going to transform Web 3. Right? All we've been doing up to this point is remaking what currently exists or trying to copy it or trying to make it decentralized and faster, cheaper, easier. But the ultimate goal here is, what's that innovation, right? What's going to happen? The way I see it, I think you're going to have kind of NTTs, right? Non-transferable tokens, which are maybe your driver's license or your passport or your identity that you hold that you can't transfer, right? But that holds value to you in your identity. NFTs, but not as the PFPs as we see it today, but college degrees and contracts and automating a lot of things that are currently slow and take time. So I'll pass it to Jay.
So if I can maybe touch on a particular aspect of that, which is Avalanche has always been built with financial use cases in mind. And one of the most exciting things, we talked about a lot in Barcelona with the summit, it's come up today in both rooms, subnets. So A, can you explain to the room what a subnet is? And B, why is it so game-changing for the real-world use cases we care about? So I've given you a really hard one there.
Yeah, so I think to take what John was talking about, same idea. When someone says, hey, can you explain a subnets? I'll explain what it actually is, but I'll also explain it the way I probably tell that story. And I think the best analogy to me is, don't worry about actually the underlying protocol, Avalanche, or any of the complexities of what's happening. But think about a web page. We all know how a web page works. If you picked scalability solutions on a web page to just do it on one domain, think google.com, for example, imagine how terrible of a user experience it would be if you only scaled by adding more pages to Google, and that's how the World Wide Web was accessed. So if you wanted to go to use Uber, you'd have to go to google.com/Uber or Amazon. That's currently what's happening in the blockchain ecosystem. Everyone is trying to convince each other to build on one blockchain. And that, at the end of the day, to use that analogy, is simply not scalable, both from a UX perspective, but also from a technological perspective. It's just going to overwhelm the servers, and it's not great for traffic. And so if you pick subnets, think of that as simply as another domain. And think about those applications being built on those domains. That makes sense to, I believe, everybody here, because I think everybody had used a computer to register for this event, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. And that's kind of the higher level understanding of subnets, and you can have different applications to it. So the more technical explanation is subnets just is another blockchain that you could program, you could use your application and build it on top of. You can customize certain elements of it, like transaction fees, who's actually validating or processing those transactions, and a few other components that aren't really developed quite yet for kind of the first release, but other farther out ideas is you could program compliance on chain. So if you don't have the proper credentials, like John was talking about, you simply can't participate in that subnet or that website, kind of taking the analogy again. And I think what Anthony is kind of touching on, what we're really excited about, and what we're hoping that a lot of people in the space, and hopefully also people that aren't in the space are really excited about, is you can truly have applications that scale, but also scale to fit your needs. I think that's really important. To have this one model of a blockchain and assume that that model will work for everybody is a little bit silly. We live in a very flexible, dynamic, diverse world, and I think it should fit those models. And right now, the main use cases that we're seeing are games, right? Like games, if you think about it on a regular blockchain, they incur transaction fees. How many games have you played where every single time you make a move, you have to pay basically a transaction fee to progress in the game? Almost none, right? That only really exists in Web3. And so there are mechanisms to simplify that user experience to maybe say, hey, the fee shouldn't exist at all. Maybe the fee should be incurred in the in-game token or the protocol token that the game is using. And I think that's where the opportunities lie. And I think to kind of close this out with what John was saying is we don't really know exactly what that ideal use case is. And so our best way forward is to at least provide some sort of guidance to builders, like I'm sure people like yourselves, to say, hey, these are the verticals that we feel like are most interesting. What can we do with it? If you can try and break the model, that's even better, because then people are actually really trying hard to push through the seams and create something that's actually quite new. And I think that's really ultimately what's exciting, and that's why I kind of bring it back to the real world use cases. People are always like, what's actually happening in crypto? And I think that's kind of what we want to really touch on in at least this conversation.
Go ahead.
So so that's how marketing explains subnets. How BD explains subnets is very similar, but with a little bit of a twist, right? Jay hit the nail on the head, right, with the analogies and everything, and it's perfect. I mean, at a base level, of course, scalability matters, but also use cases matter, right? So the way I like to talk to partners and potential people, potential partners building subnets is very simply put, they're app-specific chains. It is silly to think that one chain can do everything, right? Gun says this, and people have said this for years. Blockchains are solutions in search of a problem, right? People create this great blockchain, and they think they know that this is going to be the best invention that's going to solve everyone's problems, but they can't envision what everybody's use case is. And Avalanche really was built from the ground up, right, to take into account many different use cases. But if you're talking to a financial institution, they're not going to want to be running their infrastructure on a public chain alongside a profile picture NFT project and DeFi and God knows what. It just doesn't make sense, right? Regardless if it's wallets or users, they're not going to run confidential stuff on a public chain. So forget public chains, right? For anything of significant financial infrastructure, it's not going to ever happen on a public chain. So what's the alternative? You have your enterprise chains, right? All these great things that came out. Ooh, enterprise chains. What's the benefit of an enterprise chain if it's a closed system? Then you might as well just have a database, and you don't need a blockchain. For as much as I love to get partnerships, I find myself telling partners a lot of times, can you explain to me why you need a blockchain for this? And they usually can't, because they just want a blockchain. But for those who really do want one, they're not going to launch it on an enterprise chain. That's why you haven't seen those enterprise chains really working, because there isn't a larger community. There isn't a larger ecosystem. There isn't more assets there, right? If you're a financial institution and you're going to run a platform or a payments, or you want to pull USDC or something from the C chain or from the main chain, right, to allow for payments. Those other chains don't have it. They don't have NFTs. They don't have a million other use cases. So subnets, to me, the way I explain it, are app-specific chains. What is your purpose? Your purpose, to Jay's point, perfect example is gaming, right? Everybody here's probably heard of Axie Infinity. If you haven't, it's a very well-known game. They had a ton of transactions, so they had to go create their own blockchain, right? Those guys are game developers. They build games. That's what they do well. They did a great job. They're not distributed systems experts, and they're not blockchain engineers. They have no business building a blockchain, just like our blockchain engineers have no business building a game. So you provide them with the infrastructure layer they need as a subnet that they can tweak to fit their use case. Because it's, again, silly to think that a single blockchain can do everything under the sun. It cannot. Or a single chain, right? So you need app-specific chains. To Jay's point as well, you need safeguards, right? If you're a game, you might need higher throughput. You might need lower fees. You might need no fees. If you're a financial institution, you might need KYC or AML. If you're in the EU, you need GDPR restrictions. You can create rules that allow certain people to use the system and others not to. So depending, I guess this is a long-winded way of saying, depending who I talk to, you have a different pitch or a different explanation because everybody has a different use case for it. And subnets allow you to build the use case that you want on a dedicated chain.
Fantastic. There's so much to unpack. Let's go in the gaming direction. So Jay, GameFi on Avalanche is exploded quite nicely. Which are your favorite games? Which should people be trying? And what should we be looking out for on GameFi on Avalanche coming up soon?
Maybe, I don't know if I have a favorite just yet. I think we're too early for that. And I don't want to swing anyone in the wrong direction. Yeah, very political. But I think the main recommendation is just to try the games. And I've had actually a bunch of conversations today about games. And I don't think games are quite there at the level, or Web3 games are not even close, actually, to the level at which regular games are at. And the one simple way I describe it is regular games, you actually have fun playing them. In Web3 games, you have fun because you're making money, but only if you're making money. And not half of the players certainly are losing. That's just how these markets work. And so I think with gaming, there's been a lot of limitations on the layer one or blockchain level. Ethereum has been out for a while, and they've had games, but it's not conducive to that high throughput environment that's kind of putting, the games are putting on the chain itself, the demand, I guess. And so I think a lot of these games have been holding back, or like what John was saying, they had to create their own solutions, and they weren't the most ideal solutions either, because they basically had to innovate as they're already running. And so I think the biggest recommendation, including myself, and I tell this to myself all the time, is actually to try the games. Don't just take our word for it. Just really understand, like, is this something that works for certain people? Is this something that I would enjoy? Is this something that your grandparents or your parents? Maybe not, and it doesn't have to be a yes. But then understanding who it's for, I think, is the main goal. And so hopefully with what we talked about with subnets and the scalability solutions, these, I guess, bottlenecks for these game apps, hopefully a lot of them have been lifted. That's our, at least, hypothesis that we have. And then if it is lifted, then hopefully it's going to be the next iteration, which is how does it run? And there's a lot of complexities. There's like token economics. It's, again, is the game actually fun? And then actually merging the two seamlessly is quite difficult. And so the challenge I think I put out to any game developer is if you're building a game, that's amazing, and I think I wouldn't say to stop building that game. But I also think a really easy challenge is let's figure out how to celebrate smaller milestones. Is there a way to create simple games that are truly fun and simple token economic models that you can integrate, not maybe easily, but at least more easily than maybe your complex game that has a whole world and lore and all these things that you have to basically tie in on day one, effectively. And so the analogy I gave, or the comparison rather, was imagine a Pong game. Everyone remembers the Atari game. It's very easy mechanics, or very simple mechanics. You have one ball that moves from left to right, and if you let it past your goalpost, you get 1 point, or the other person gets 1 point, and you don't get the other point, and vice versa. Imagine if there was a way to put that on Web3 and actually have people play it. It's a very easy test use case. Everyone knows how to play Pong. Everyone certainly agrees that it's fun. It's had a lot of tried and true, I guess, pressure put on it for decades. And now if you can put a simple token economics model, I would say that's a complete Web3 game. And so I think the really crux of this point is, let's focus on it being fun. Let's not overcomplicate the actual token economic model, because that also can be super distracting, and see if we can start walking slowly and not maybe doing what John was saying a lot of his enterprise calls end up being, where you're trying to really find the problem with a solution when there might actually not even be a problem. And so I think that's where hopefully even with some of the market activity generally that's happened the last few weeks, I think that might slow things down a little bit, because then people are going to be like, all right, we're no longer racing and sprinting to the finish, but at least we're like on a light jog and a little bit more calm. And maybe that's why we have also the Zen Garden, and try and make sure that everyone's in a good mental state before we get into more heady like Web3 topics, because this stuff is very, very complex. And I know we all have spent countless hours trying to understand what a private key is, understand all the little basics, and we finally got here. So it'd be a real shame to move too fast, I think. More of like a philosophical commentary on
We love philosophy. John, it's your job to really look ahead, really kind of think about the partnerships of the future for Avalanche. So kind of, let's stay philosophical. What haven't you seen yet, which you really want to see? And want to see, particularly in a bear market condition, proper builders. What use cases are you dying out for that you'd love to come across your desk?
So I'm going to go back to his answer on the last one on gaming, and then as I'm talking, I'll think of an answer to that question. Jay brings up an important point, and I don't have a favorite game or anything, but okay, so I'll tie it into yours, Anthony, here. I think gaming has an opportunity to really do the education part for us. Because how many people are in Web3? What's the recent number? Couple million, few million, 10 million?
Hundreds of millions of coin holders.
Okay, coin holders, but people actually doing stuff on Web3, right? Not that many. Gaming has the ability, more than anything, to onboard 10 million, 100 million, 500 million users globally. Because anyone from kids to teenagers to young adults and older play games. So once you start playing games, and once you start saying, oh, I want to play this game, and not to make money, but because playing the game gets you a reward, right? There's a difference between playing to make money and while you play, you get something. But that's a great on-ramp, right? That's a great education tool. That, for me, is what's exciting. Because that next 10, 100, 300 million users that come in, who are forced to learn how things work in Web3 to play a game, will then start to use a Web3 wallet to send money to their friends. And then they might take that money and they might, lend it on a platform, or they might use it to mint an NFT, or they might, right? So where do I see it going? Again, I don't know. But I do see the next wave of real adoption coming, and it's through gaming, more so than NFTs. Gaming, I think, is really going to bring the tech-savvy people that will become users of this technology and spread it. Where I really think also it could go, more so than enterprise, right? So in my capacity, I oversee teams that do DeFi, NFTs, institutional capital markets, enterprise, exchanges and wallets, and gaming. Those are the 6 verticals within BD. The exciting stuff for me, I think, is really abstracting away people's real-world identities. And what I mean by that is ensuring privacy. And so let me give you a use case, because I don't know how this is going to really play out. But let me give you a use case that excites me. If I want to go buy a pair of limited edition Adidas, right? People don't now wait in line. It takes however long. You buy a pair of shoes from Adidas, they're $300, whatever, right? But you get with those shoes an NFT, right? It's number 378 out of 10,000. It's black with white soles. That is your certificate of authenticity, right? Those little pesky papers that you get when you buy something that you throw in the trash. What is an NFT in reality? It's a digital certificate of authenticity. So if you start to think through it, what can NFTs, aside from PFPs, become? How can there be value attached to them? How can they fit into a larger ecosystem? Well, if I buy a pair of Adidas and I have an NFT of that exact pair, and then I go sell it to Anthony for $5,000 because it's a collectible or whatever in a secondary market, if you're Adidas and you're selling it to me, you know me by my wallet address. Currently, how do you know me? You know me by my name, my date of birth, my email, probably my address. You know way too much about me so that if you get hacked as Adidas, someone has way too much information on me to take advantage of it. Well, instead of having my name and birth date and address and probably a credit card, you have a wallet address. Your name is not attached to that. So you sell me a pair of sneakers for $300. I sell them to Anthony for $5,000. Hey, Anthony, here's this NFT with it too. Now you, as Adidas, can no longer lose that connection with me, but now you can. These are tools that will need to be built, of course, for builders to do. But now Adidas can airdrop him Adidas tokens or whatever, so that he can use them for the next drop of something. So customer acquisition, customer retention, transfer of data, transfer of information can continue without it being tied to the individual and their PII, right? Your personal identifying information. All we hear about is hacks and people's information and everything. So what I start to see is a world where the individual is abstracted away in terms of your identity, and you're known by a wallet, right? Or multiple wallets, or you use wallets to really hide your personal stuff and your identity and transfer value at that level. That's where I start to see things going. I think you'll start to see home mortgages and contracts be NFT'd. I think you'll start to see NFTs interacting more with smart contracts. So on this date of every month, then there's a smart contract that triggers a payment based on a mortgage, and everything just starts to get more and more automated. That's where I see it going. Again, it could be a million other things, but.
Very nice indeed. It's clear that it's kind of hard to shy away from a bear market, perhaps, market conditions. Does that scare you or motivate you? Is it good for the Avalanche ecosystem? It's obviously not the best thing in the world, but is it good because it strips out the bad, you're left with the builders? Does it worry you? Sense of realism? Oh, take all your best ideas and reshill them. That's what I do. But Jay, what do you think on that one?
I don't know if it's a conversation about good or bad necessarily. There's probably equal kind of points for both sides, depending on who you are in the space. But I think what it does is what I was mentioning before. It slows things down a little bit. As someone who's worked through quite a few bear markets in crypto specifically, I remember some of the most compelling ideas, at least from my previous roles especially, came through when you're just dealing with 10,000 users, 5,000 users. Because when you get from 5,000 users to 6,000 users, it's likely not related to price action, which is what's been happening the last 2 or 3 years, and it's purely based on the product increasing its utility or increasing its appeal some way or somehow. And so I think those minute signals are super important, especially for myself and also probably for John as well as a BD person, to really pay attention to those things. What are the users doing? Why are there core users? Are these core users very, very informed in this industry, or are they not? Especially if they are informed, then ask them what's their journey like? Why are they here? Are they here just because they've been through the entire market and they know all the nuances and they basically are experts at this? That could be one reason. For the newcomer, is it because they're sick and tired of, let's say, pick a DeFi application, sick and tired of some of the ways their experience is in Web 2 and in traditional finance, and maybe they just wanted to take a leap of faith. And maybe that leap of faith also doesn't last a long time. It's kind of like, what is going to compel you to change your behavior, and not only change your behavior, but stick to that new form of behavior? And I think that's where we're at collectively in this industry right now. I think everyone kind of tends to look at TVL. I don't personally like that as a really good metric, to be honest, but I tend to find more peace with the metric of users and user activity on a day-to-day basis, month-to-month basis. And I think the next 6 months, 12 months, it's going to be really critical to understand where that is. I think if you pick January, for example, those metrics are going to be wildly different from what we're going to be seeing the next year or so, I would say. And so again, it's kind of to really loop this back, it's really about focus, shaking out the distractions, and also basically suppressing some of the positive signals, which mostly come from just the price action, to be honest. And one of the things I personally say, at least to a lot of people in the industry, when they say, or when they ask, what's one of the most frustrating things about the industry? I actually think it's the token price. It's the most distracting thing you could ever imagine to all of us, including myself. And it's also the same explanation I put forth after that question is, it's almost like the feeling is almost like you're a startup, or you are a startup, being treated like a publicly traded company. It's an absurd, absurd situation to be in, but that's how it is in our space. And so we tend to grow into that, and I don't think anyone in the industry has really figured out how best to manage that. And I think that's why we're here trying to talk to people like you to kind of sense and respond. What's working, what's not? Is this type of event something that really can cultivate great ideas, or is it just noise? We hope that it is not noise, and we're actually able to cultivate amazing ideas and combine a lot of diverse thoughts and really hope for more progression. But again, it's all this experiment, which is why I also am really excited about this space. It almost feels like you're at the edge of your seat at all times, for better or for worse.
John, what do you want to add? Then we'll take some, I think, audience questions as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I do want to add. I want to add to that because it's really important, right? I was watching the news last night in my hotel room. It's like crypto bear market, and is this the end of crypto? What do you mean? How is this a? I mean, who thinks we're in a bear market right now? Why? Because of token price? Because daily active users going up, daily transactions going up, new projects going up. Every single metric is going up except token price.
No, but that's not true. Transactions are down since 2 months, basically across all at once.
Depends on which chain you look at. Depends on which project you look at.
I look at the basket of 12 chains and I don't see a lot of transaction growth in the last 2 months.
Avalanche had the highest transaction volume it's ever had the past 3 days, ever. So, true, but users growing, applications growing, adoption growing, token price, So the people that are in this space simply for the token price are not in this space for the long term, and they're not building, and they're not really creating value, right? So that's the way I look at it. I look at more people using it for the most part? Yes. Are use cases growing? Yes. Are real players using it? Yes. Right? Because when you have a market where everything is going up, you have a lot of bad money following good money. You have a lot of bad ideas being mixed in with good ideas because everything is great. And everyone who has an idea gets funding, and every project all of a sudden has users, and then it goes away. And it scares people, right? Because the token prices or worry people. They start to see price go down. Oh, I don't want to mess with this stuff, right? But to Jay's point, it's the biggest distraction. Because at the end of the day, that's not the metric that really drives adoption and growth and maturity. That's what scares the regulators. That's what scares retail. That's what scares mass adoption. At the end of the day, you bring value by giving people tools to make their life better, making things easier, making things cheaper. We're seeing the most amount of incoming partnerships and flows now than ever. I am sure over the next month it's going to slow down just because everyone's scared. But to the point, these are the best times for people that are really building to build. Right? These are the times for people that are innovating who will innovate. Not everyone with an idea during a bull market can throw something against the wall and automatically get funded. Creates a lot of noise, creates a lot of distractions. You know, for those of you familiar with Avalanche's story, we came out of this during a bear market, right? Avalanche was built during a bear market, took off, we had a little bit of a bear market, and then we succeeded. So for me, this is a great time for us as a team to put our heads down and think, what's the next stage of growth? What's the next stage of adoption? What projects are really worthy of support? And what teams are really building those things? Because that's really, once we get out of whatever this is, it's great. So that's how I look at it. I mean, yes, was it yesterday or the day before? I'm upside down on my days now. Crabata launched their swimmer network on us. That's going to be a subnet for their game, but also for other games. So if you add that with DFK, with our chains, we're, with the main chain, we're above, we're having back-to-back highest daily active transactions. And all the metrics that really matter for the most part on chains that matter are going up. So,
very nice indeed. Should we take some audience questions? Who has a question for our esteemed panel? To you, sir. You might have to speak up. I think we're a little bit lacking microphones. Well?
Hi. First of all, thanks for the chat. And I would like to focus on the gaming aspect of it. As Jay said, right now, the games are not really on the same level of we have AAA games for my users. I've been a Kevin guy, esports focused. So what do you think, guys, knowing your expertise, why actually publishers like Riot, Blizzard, or Epic Games are not pivoting to blockchain yet? Because if you see CSGO, obviously they have a marketplace, you have the skins, etc., etc. So it's for me, it's a logical pivoting to that. It's because maybe the volatility of the market itself, that they cannot rely on that. Could be that a milestone on the crypto world to reach in order to have those big guys coming into the space that will really be super good for the gaming industry.
Yes, just so I can get the question, is it that your question is, why isn't the bigger game developers adopting blockchain more quickly because it's such an obvious use case for them?
Exactly. It's kind of like based on your, obviously, I guess you had contact guys with those publishers. What are they pushing them back to make that transition right
so
now?
I mean, there's a bunch of different reasons why that's the case, but I think the overarching sentiment that comes to mind immediately, which is relevant to all of us, is blockchain is scary, crypto is scary, simply put. Why? It takes hours to get to like a level 1 proficiency. We've all put in the time, I think, or if some of you haven't, you tried to, and it was quite daunting. Once you put in all that time to understanding what you're actually doing with this technology, then you're put in the driver's seat immediately. It's like if you learned how to drive and they put you on a Formula E car the next day. You might do okay, but most people probably are going to have a really difficult time completing the whole lap. And I think that's really from the gaming industry's perspective, it's really new for all of us. It's only been around, smart contracts have only been around for 5 to 7 years in kind of like the more widely known level that it's at now. It's not even that widely known, but widely known and used and built upon. It's only been probably really active for the last 3 years. And so I think it takes time. I think another main component is these game developers are simply not incentivized to change their business model. Some of the biggest development studios in the world are printing money because they're not open, because they have siloed architecture that focuses on maximizing revenue with everything within their in-game ecosystem. And so for a company like us, you have, you have all these game developers, I won't necessarily name specific ones, but you have the traditional ones on one side, and all of a sudden you have Web3 all the way on the other. And I think there still needs a little bit of work, taking a little bit of what John said, education, talking to those stakeholders. What does it actually mean? Maybe it's not about porting over their biggest franchise game on blockchain. Maybe it's about what I mentioned before, taking some mini game or a mobile game, or maybe targeting a game that's really profitable in a market that is very crypto ready. And so really taking those risks I think make most sense for these developers, but they're not quite there yet. I think what we're seeing right now are centers of excellence, these innovation studios where they're trying to educate from within. We just haven't seen like big developers really take the plunge in a meaningful way beyond just marketing. And I think the next 3 to 5 years we'll probably see a few more studios come into play. But what really needs to happen is I think a lot of new innovation and kind of on the startup side needs to come in and challenge these developers until they feel threatened, like with any other industry aside from outside of Web3. Think about ride sharing, think about finance, think about hotels and hospitality, all these things. They didn't really take things seriously until there was a major player challenging their revenue model. And I think that's why I'm giving the 3 to 5 range, at least for what you were mentioning.
I want to add to that, though. I think there is a big change. And to Jay's point, the established guys and the incumbent guys aren't going to make a change unless they have to. Some are. I mean, we're talking to mostly all of them. Some are still trying to figure it out, kind of like with the banks. And then there's others who are like, we need to do this yesterday. So on our BD team, our head of gaming is Ed Chang, right? Ed has been heroic in what he's done since he's joined. He was the senior director of partnerships at Electronic Arts. His colleagues across all the other traditional gaming firms are leaving traditional gaming and coming to Web3. So if you really want to know the metric that matters, it's where's the talent, and the talent is all fleeing the old and joining the new. So we're winning there, 1. 2, there are AAA games. We have Shrapnel coming on board, Ascenders, a lot of AA. The reason they're not here yet is because they just started 2 months ago, 6 months ago. These guys raised hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think Shrapnel's like $220 or $280 million budget, something, right? These are like full-length motion picture film budgets. So they're not a quick turnaround play-to-earn game, right? These are a full production that usually take 12, 18 months. So we have 5, 6 AAA games coming, I think. A dozen or more AA. I mean, we're approving 8, 10 games a week or providing support. Everything from AAA down to single A down to idle games, right? Wildlife Studios, Candy Crush coming on Avalanche. So they are coming. I think a lot are not talking about it yet, or they're still figuring it out. But then there are the ones that are coming. It's just going to take time because their production life cycle is much longer. So by the end of this year, I think you're really going to start to see that shift.
I think we've got time for one question, and we'll
Thank you.
otherwise take the discussion by the drinks bar. Should we go down the middle? No.
Sorry.
We'll go there. Very good. Even better.
Apart from games, like where do you see the biggest pain point in real-world adoption? Where do you think you would like Avalanche to succeed the most?
There's definitely a bunch of different points for that one, like with most of these questions, but I think the one that stands out to me the most is infrastructure UX. Infrastructure UX being, what are the surrounding elements that get you to the point where you have a wallet with AVAX in it or any other crypto asset on it? It's not just opening an app and voila, you have that asset. For those that don't know the process, it kind of sounds like this. You have to take a bank. If your bank doesn't whitelist these exchanges, or it doesn't blacklist the exchanges, then you're in luck. Then connect the bank. Then transfer it over, fund it with whatever currency is on a centralized exchange or just a major exchange, and then you get at least your asset into some sort of crypto. Then if you pick a chain like Avalanche, where Avalanche has now gotten quite big the last few years, but early days, you'd have to then trade it for Avalanche. And then once you get to Avalanche, you can't actually do anything still. You have to move that into a wallet that works. And so those are some of the steps that you have to get through just to fund your wallet that you own in your own custody, I guess is kind of the more technical way to phrase it. And so that is a nightmare in itself. There's certainly other nightmarish scenarios for UX. And so we need to make sure that that isn't like that. And it's more like what we experience with Web 2, where imagine, or no, you don't even have to imagine. Think back to the days of dial-up. You had to do very similar things. You had to make sure no one was calling anybody. You had to then make sure that you had like 3 minutes to connect. Then you had to listen to that like sound that was beeping in the background while you connected. And then if you made the connection, your internet speed was still extremely, extremely slow. And you couldn't really download high bandwidth images, videos, anything like that. And so I think with infrastructure, if you want to be specific, it's really about exchange infrastructure, on-ramps and off-ramps, meaning how do you get from fiat or regular currencies to crypto and back? how do you then get to use those currencies in the applications that we've all been talking about? Can it be as easy as, hey, I want to connect to Wi-Fi, let me see the network, boom. That's how it should be. And so we're hoping to now unlock a lot of those issues, or I guess solve those issues in the coming, honestly, quarters and even within the year. And so our team, especially the product team, we're trying to either create the solution ourselves or through John's team and really find those solutions. I think it's a balance of both. And I honestly think, as someone who's been in the industry for quite some time, I've seen it progress quite nicely. It's not the most ideal state that we're in, but if anyone remembers early days of MetaMask, they basically showed you everything of what you needed to know, or not what you needed to know, but every single code snippet, what was going on. I'm not a developer. I remember when I was seeing that, I was thinking, what is this massive string telling me? And then my engineering friend was like, oh, that's just to approve a contract. And I was like, why didn't you just tell me that? And saying this is to approve a contract so you could spend money instead of showing me 4 lines of code, right? And so I think those are the minor optimizations we can make. There's certainly larger ones with actually creating standstill solutions, and I think that's the biggest challenge that we need to be combating collectively, I think.
I'll go back to it again. Education first. More people know, the more they're familiar with this technology, the more they use it, the better. But to Jay's point, usability, right? Again, there's an elitism here with private keys and wallets and making sure everybody understands how as much as you do to enter into this special space, right? So the distinction between people who hold tokens, who are just speculators, and actual users is vast. We need to get the number of speculators to equal the number of users and then onboard more users who might or might not know they're using blockchain, because the process is simple, it's easy, it's seamless, right? Again, as fast, if not faster, as cheap, if not cheaper, and as easy, if not easier than what currently exists. If we don't solve for those 3 things, then we might as well not be trying to do anything at all. So that's where I would say. I think those 2 things matter the most, because at the end of the day, if those 2 things matter, then we all win as an industry. And then I am, of course, biased because I think Avalanche is the best. So to me, the more people who come into this space, the better it is for everybody, because once they use Avalanche, they know it just works and is great, and then that's better for us too. So I don't need to go out there and compare and lobby for Avalanche. I need to go out there, we need to go out there and lobby for this industry as a whole and for more users, because the more people that come on, the more people that use it, the more people will make their own distinction on their own. What's the easiest to use? What's the fastest to use? What's the best to use? What doesn't go down? What has long-term viability? So that's the way I see it.
Thanks.
On that, unfortunately, we have to take the rest of the questions outside. What a fantastic pleasure, guys. Brilliant insights, fantastic questions as well. And guys, thank you very, very much. And round of applause for our brilliant panel, please.